us can adapt in a way that meets all of the needs that they're trying to address in these legal opinions. So I'll send more out about this video. You don't have to check it out now. In reference to today's conversation, there was one article I included about using blogs for online hybrid or high flex teaching. In addition to that, I had some other articles that I found that are just conversations that you can have about social media and using social media or taking advantage of opportunities with social media to teach more interactive classes. And if you want any of these are just like the first 6 that came up when I Googled social media and teaching. So this one is talking about, and some of these are K-12, but still fine for us, certainly, using social media to retain and connect with students. And this talks about how to use it to complement your communication. Find a platform that works for you. It might be YouTube, it might be Instagram, it might be Facebook, it just kind of depends. It might be Twitter. They talk about staying on brand, targeting the whole student, using this new tool to engage students. A lot of different examples here. Cross-promote your institution. This is the one that I'm really interested in today, though, is this idea that we can use either social media in a literal sense, so we could teach something to our students using a blog or using YouTube, and I sometimes do it with my classes because I'm so involved in YouTube, or you could just use the opportunities of social media. And we'll talk about that later, but by that I mean one of the great things about social media is that students feel comfortable posting often personal pictures, even talking about problems that they're having, talking about issues in the world, talking about politics, the environment. And whether they know that or not, they're actually engaging with the world and they're putting themselves out there, right? In a sense, connecting to what we'll talk about on November 3rd, civic connections. So I feel like even if you're not literally using a blog or Facebook or YouTube in your class as you're directly teaching your students, you could encourage students by using some of the things that they're good at because of social media. As an example, in my visual anthro class, I have a couple people that are really skilled at video work, at photography, and some of that I think happens through YouTube and Instagram, experimenting with photos and videos and so forth. So having that ability to engage students better with social media, that's for me like my number one in talking about this today. These are others, and I'm not going to go through all these in depth, but this is talking about guides, resources, and ideas. And it has all kinds of tips, 7 ways to use social media in the classroom, the Educator's Guide to Instagram and photo sharing apps. Pinterest is another one. I mean, there are so many of these. For a while, I tried to sign up for a lot of them. Tumblr, Pinterest. I had a blog, I think it was on Tumblr, YouTube, of course, Facebook, Twitter. And I found like my saturation with technology and social media was just driving me crazy. So I said I can at best keep to 3. So now I am on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And YouTube's my primary one because I'm doing all my music and video and training stuff there. But some people are on multiple boards. So if you're on Pinterest, and Pinterest really could be something that you could use in a class, particularly a class like in graphic design, because Pinterest is laid out almost more like a mood board approach than, say, links of text like on Twitter. That could be really great to explore in your class. And again, you could use it for teaching, you could use it for extra credit, you could just use the skills or technologies relevant to that form of social media like Pinterest to leverage in your class and to have students feel more comfortable with something that you're teaching or a technique. We talked in a meeting today about portfolios. So portfolios could be a good example of something that you could search the web for, social media sites, blog sites that maybe give students examples to look at. And I think not unlike the discussion we had when Eric was here a couple weeks ago, we talked about video games and we said there are pros and cons of video games. A con is students or anyone spends all their time in the video game world and they don't get their work done or they don't attend their classes. A pro is video games can get people really motivated. They're high emotion. They're creative. People that do sound design and scene design for video games obviously are doing something incredibly creative and powerful. So to try to balance those is, I think, a segue to talking about some things today with social media. Here's another one. This was from Ashford University. It's just talking about how to use social media as a learning tool. They talk about the types of tools, and these are good to just review today. We have blogs, of course. We have Twitter. We have Skype or Zoom is probably more what we're using. Pinterest. Google Docs for collaboration. A lot of faculty use Google Docs. I was talking to a counseling faculty member who wanted to have her students fill out like in sequence documents. And she said, what could I use? And I said, use Google Docs because it's shareable and students, it's cumulative. Students can add comments and embed comments and it grows over time. The same thing with a wiki. When we think of a wiki, we think of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a collaborative encyclopedia. So you can right now go into Canvas and use the tool. There's a wiki tool if you set up group assignments, and all of those students in that group have the same wiki. They create pages, they can do video links, they can do photos, and that is a skill directly coming out of social media and Wikipedia. So again, collaboration could be another goal of this work just because a lot of social media appears to be collaborative in nature. LinkedIn is one that I would say, if you're teaching a work experience class or teaching resumes, definitely jump on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think, looks clunky, and I know that's the point of it, but it's not very creative for video or photos. It's very clunky for that, but it looks great for text and it's very professional and, kind of looks like a resume that you might view. It has just text and links, really. And then YouTube, of course, to create course and student presentations. We have the advantage of having Zoom. We also have Canvas Studio. I would recommend going to Canvas Studio first. And Canvas Studio is an example of a technology that actually builds in some of the social media tools of collaboration and liking and commenting. You see more and more, I think, things and features in Canvas that have the like button or have a collaborative dialogue area where students can collaborate and write comments at specific points in your video. And that's directly lifted from YouTube. So YouTube and Facebook really are directly affecting what we're doing in Canvas, whether we know it or not, or whether we like it or not. So a lot of social media tools to use. Different sources here that you can click on that talks about how to use any kind of social media in your classes and how you might leverage that for better learning or better comprehension or creativity. So that's another good article. And these are all really effective, I think, just looking at in the future. What about effective social media practices and good online teaching? Is there a link between teaching, tweeting, and blogging? And this is probably pretty relevant for us today. And as they say at the top, the two key words are presence and community. One of the things you learn in social media is how to have a presence, have a brand presence, or if you're an influencer, as they're called on YouTube, and you have 2 million views and you have a cool channel on vintage clothing or something, you've built that over time and you're an influencer because something about how you're presenting yourself and your content is attractive to an audience, and you stick with it, you persevere. So I feel like some of the skills that top influencers in blogging, social media, YouTube, Facebook have developed are really good skills to translate to classroom learning, whether it's a business class or a media design class or even a sociology class. And then the second key word is community. So we know that social media is all about community, and I think in a lot of our classes, whether we're doing community-based projects or not, we're interested in students collaborating and working together. So some of those skills we can take to what we're doing. I'll just show you two more of these. This is one on using social media and online education and asking the question, why should we do it? There are certain challenges, of course, but here are some benefits. One is computer literacy. Another one is helping with communication problems and the lack of human contact, which under COVID we're dealing with now, of course, via Zoom. Another one is to get people engaged. If they're bored, if they lack social or self-motivation, it's a good opportunity to get them excited about things. So as you read more and more of these, I think you'll find the reasons for using social media in a class can be really strong and powerful. This is from Michigan State. How can teachers use social media to improve learning. And they talk about some research in particular. You might click on some of these surveys on how social media is used or how it impacts the classroom. And that in particular I thought was a pretty interesting study. This was on K-12 education, but we have many young students who come directly out of high school, and I think we could take advantage of what these studies have taught us. Before I go into the next bit here, and the next bit will be on blogs and how we can use some of these tools actually in online. I just wonder, like, Solange, did you have any, you probably see social media popping up in your classes because you're teaching classes that directly relate to creating media, including in social media platforms.
We're not quite there yet. We are in week 6, so it's we are about to start using social media as we speak. Up until now, it's been learning the apps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but teaching everything that you do in media, teaching all that, those are direct skills that students can use, and you never know. I mean, someone might end up being an influencer or having a really successful social media site, and they can directly incorporate what you're teaching them in those contexts.
Or they may not have any experience with social media, and they may need guidance and
Yep.
guidance to be able to get through what all the choices are. So there's the other side of the coin.
Totally. And one of the things I would say is I think I've heard this before prior to COVID, when we talk about students who take online classes, I think the assumption is, well, it's quote young students, meaning, 18 to 24, straight out of high school, and they're really good with technology. I think sometimes that's true, but I have met young students who they don't know how to work a phone, or they don't know how to do a YouTube video or something like that. So I think that whole age assumption is false, and I think sometimes we make that assumption, and we should question that, because not everybody knows coming into a class how to do the stuff that we're talking about here today. So
That's exactly right. And I
yeah,
have 30 students, and all of them come from various backgrounds. And
yeah,
so I have to take that into consideration.
yeah, totally. So I think it's just an opportunity when you teach a class, you can kind of immediately check in and see if any of these techniques or tools would work in your class. As an example, in my visual anthro class now, I have a student. He's very skilled he has a YouTube channel, and he does their like religious videos. He has some interest in doing these videos like in various field settings. So he'll record a video, he'll put it on his YouTube, and he's been posting on how he approaches visually what he's trying to communicate with his titles and even his transitions. So you have students like that who are very sophisticated in media. And then you have other students who maybe they're on Facebook, but just being on Facebook, to be honest, it's easy to use. And the controversial side of the technology with social media is it's actually something we're talking about coming up, I believe, in 2 weeks. We're discussing this whole movement in Instagram. It's the no filter Instagram movement, and it's actually its own hashtag. The feeling by some photographers and visual artists is that Instagram, because of all its filters, and you can immediately have whatever movie is out now. Like I was looking last night trying to find free LUTs, which are lookup tables, color grading tables for Final Cut Pro. And nowadays, they're not just like, the noir look, which is black and shadowy and has a vignette on the, outside rectangle of the screen. But nowadays, they're very specific to shows. So they'll say, oh, you can get a LUT for Stranger Things, or you could get a LUT for the show Dark, or very popular now, the blue and teal color grading that you see in a lot of shows. So what's curious about that on the one hand is you can quickly download a filter or a plugin for your video program, your Photoshop, whatever, and you can make something look like what it is on TV or out there on social media. But the artists out there are saying, it's detracting from the skill needed to take photos and to really do skillful color grading. I mean, Solange knows, working on a film, you have people that just do color grading and spend all their time working on this, and it's maddening. I tried it once in DaVinci, And then I just finally said, I have to use something basic because I don't have the time to dedicate. So some of those shortcuts that happen in social media, you take a photo, it'll make your photo 3D, or it'll make it with a background, foreground, blur, or something like that to make it all fancy and artsy. The purists out there would say that's a negative thing because it's not really teaching you what you need to learn to become an artist, become a photographer, to become a filmmaker. It's showing you all the shortcuts. So I think probably part of this is getting around those shortcuts. If you're teaching something, like I could imagine, Solange, if you're teaching something about photographs, what if you had a student who just wanted to quickly use a filter and you wanted them to do it the longer way?
Well,
How would
the
you
thing is,
address that?
the thing is that this is what I say in the film industry as well. In order to break the rules, you need to learn the rules.
Right.
You need to learn the rules before you can break them.
Yep.
So I come from the long way around.
Totally. And I'm the same way. I have a lot of concerns with, I was showing a couple weeks ago that plug-in for your audio, your digital audio workstation that will make your songs sound like Drake or something. I'm critical of that too, because I feel like, there's an old value in the old days when people were working with reel-to-reels and splicing tapes and stuff. I mean, nowadays, if everything's automated, right, you don't learn the rules. You jump ahead 5,000 steps and you never learn what you need to learn. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so I'm totally old school as well. I mean, some things I like for automation, if it's something that I'm never going to, I don't have a great ear for mastering, like my end audio. So a lot of times I will take some shortcuts with Isotope, but I like to think that some of the processes I'm using in video or audio at least have more of that old school approach instead of just jumping ahead, skipping those steps, and finding an automated system.
There are many students who know how to do it, but they don't know why.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and it can be convincing. I mean, I see stuff all the time on social media, photo, even some video filters. Some of the stuff just shot on an iPhone. I mean, Steven Soderbergh did a limited series a couple years ago, just shot on an iPhone. So it's not to say you can't do it. And of course, Soderbergh, has all that experience. So when he shoots something on an iPhone versus me, there's a reason his is way better than mine. It's all that filmic experience, even though he's using something that's more limited overall. Maybe you'd say an iPhone versus a Red camera that gives you all the possibilities. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think to apply that to teaching in our classes, whatever we're teaching, if we use social media either as a real thing and we say, hey, we're doing a segment in our environmental politics class on how activists get the word out about the environment, whatever. And we incorporate this and we look at some social media sites. Even right there at that moment, we have to be critical because there was just a story released yesterday saying, I think it was Washington Post, that Iran and Russia are both actively targeting people, impersonating members of the Proud Boys and sending them menacing emails saying, don't show up to vote because, we're going to shoot you or something at the polls. So that immediately indicates that, social media is itself suspect. And so if I were teaching environmental politics and I told students to go to, and I actually have a student in my visual class this quarter, she's doing that very topic. She's looking at how political groups use social media for their causes. The danger, though, is anything you see on social media, just like anything in the news, you have to be suspicious of and remind your students, remind ourselves as teachers that it may not be real, so to speak. Deep fakes are another example of this. There's a new, I don't think it's that effective, but it supposedly takes famous movie scenes and you record, you take one of your photos, you take a shot of yourself, and it superimposes your head on top of the actor in the film. And I tried it and I actually thought it was kind of goofy. It didn't look right to me. It looked nothing like me, kind of did, but it's not super accurate. But with deep fakes out there, people are really worried that you could turn the course of an election somewhere in the world just by taking a political leader like Trump or anyone, and Angela Merkel, and then recording a fake video. A bunch of people see that, and then they don't realize it's a deep fake because the quality of it is so darn good. So that's a danger of this too, is that we will see the world through this lens of fiction and unreality when we should be more focused on maybe trying to see how the world really is. Because a lot of what social media promotes is kind of that keeping up with the Kardashians moment where it's like show only the best pictures, touch up your photos so you don't have any blemishes in your pictures, and then present yourself as glamorous, present yourself as different than who you really are. So I would personally say that authenticity is being challenged in this world through social media because a lot of young people feel like they have to present themselves in an inauthentic way, in an unreal way to their peers. And of course, that leads to peer pressure, suicide, bullying, eating disorders, and all that kind of stuff. So kind of the anthropologist in me is always saying balance the good and the bad with this. Like we talked about with Eric a couple weeks ago with video games. I will never say video games are 100% positive or 100% negative. It's somewhere in between. Likewise with social media, I'm not going to say that I love everything about social media, but I'm also not going to say social media is evil and there's no way that it could improve our teaching or our student engagement in our classes. It's like, that mixed bag kind of approach when you look at any of these issues. So I don't know. Do you have other thoughts, Solange, about how social media impacts how you teach some of those recent classes you've been doing, if at all?
Up until now, I'm avoiding because of the political disruption that we're having today. I'm trying to stay out of that bucket and trying to stay focused on the class. And what we're going to be using is YouTube, and we're using Photoshop and Audacity and I forgot the name of it. Oh, Fix.
Is it a video program?
Pixlr.
Oh, Pixlr, cool.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be using in class. We're just now starting.
And, one of the cool things about this is not just social media, it's more just the internet, but because everything is live and you can log on and share documents, Audacity or GIMP, great examples of open source free software that is there for anyone to use. So another advantage of this is you could go on and let people know, hey, this is available. It seems like every day I just found a program. I was on YouTube and I'm always looking I have this little box that will take an audio signal and it uses a Python, a scripting language, and it creates visual patterns that I can control with 3 knobs on this particular box that has an HDMI out. But I found this program that does it for free. It just takes an audio input on your phone or on your computer or your USB connection from the mixer, and it does visual patterning from audio. And so it's another example of something that you might discover and let your students know, and it's actually a cost savings to them because it doesn't cost anything to use the software. So that's a direct result of using social media, where I will be on there and I find an article or I find a link to some technology that I can use and even share with my students. So again, the good and the bad of all this. But you're right, all the anger and all the hate and just all the yelling on social media, a lot of us, I think, want to avoid it right now because it's so crazy and caustic. I totally agree with you. Now, this is something interesting. We can look at this article here. This is the one I included on the flyer. And I don't personally do this. Again, a blog is an online diary, if you will. Blogs have been around for ages. My website, for example, which is hosted through GoDaddy, has a built-in blog. I tried blogging years ago on Tumblr, and what I discovered was I just didn't keep up with it. And one of the key things that you see with social media, it was one of those articles, I forget which one, but they mentioned presence and community. So presence is really the key. With people who are, I think, really good at social media. So whether you're doing YouTube posts, whether you're doing Facebook, whether you're doing a blog on Tumblr or wherever, on WordPress, you keep up with it. And one of the studies years ago I read said something like the number of blogs that didn't get updated after a couple months, that just kind of went dormant and dead, kind of like Second Life, which has kind of died as a virtual active community. But Second Life was always saying like they had 80 million users worldwide. And then someone actually went out and did a study, and they discovered that most of those users weren't active, or a high percentage were dead. They never logged back on. And that was my case with Second Life. I went on there a couple times and I just didn't find it useful. I found it a lot of weirdos. I hate to say that. Just people who were doing strange things on social, on Second Life while you were trying to do something professional and academic. I didn't really like it, so I didn't keep up with it. Likewise with blogs. The studies that have been done, a lot of people start a blog, just like a gym membership maybe, and then they don't finish it. They don't keep up with it. So I think if you're going to do something like this, either as a way to engage your students or as a way to teach them something, you have to sort of sit down and maybe put on your calendar and say, I'll do my blog update today. I'll do my social media post if you really want to engage your students in a class. This happens to me with YouTube all the time. So if I'm looking at my YouTube videos, and my different audiences, you could just kind of see the videos I've created. So I've had time maybe to do a music video here and there, but then a lot of it focuses on, I did a whole set, just like you did, Solange, of class videos introducing each week of my class. For me, they're really short, so they're like 4 minutes or maybe 6 minutes. And then I was looking at engagement, and I have one view and one view. And that's the other side of this, is we discover that we get a little obsessed with trying to maintain our audience. And our audience could be, people that listen to us on social media for non-teaching purposes, or it could be our students. So if I start to look at, who's viewing my video, and I see there's one person, and you can at any time go into your analytics and see where and when and who demographic wise is viewing your stuff. That's another great advantage of YouTube right now. In the past, if you were a writer, whether you're a journalist or maybe writing books like memoirs or poetry, you didn't really know. There wasn't a way to study your audience and how to engage your audience. Nowadays, I can go on and immediately track who's watching my videos. And just to show you that, the easy way to do it is go to my analytics right here. And this shows me everything I ever wanted to know about my audience. And it has my total views. It tells me my top videos viewed. I can view it by date. I can do it lifetime, which I like to look at. I always think, oh, good, I didn't know. I finally passed 500,000 views. I was waiting for that. But it's a great way just to see when people are watching your videos. You can look at specific audience engagements, the time of the day. You could look at, are they from the US? Are they from the UK? Looks like I have a few viewers. 1.2% of my viewers are in Singapore. I know a few people in Singapore, having been there, and maybe that's why. Male versus female, that's very skewed, mostly male. I don't know if that means the kind of music I do is mostly male music, and this also shows you the demographic in terms of age. So what I like about social media, or in this case YouTube, and how it allows you to think about an audience, you have a lot of information at hand to really target to your audience. This is a direct skill that you could teach the students. So for example, if a student wants to be a writer, they want to be a romance writer, or they want to be a journalist and eventually work for the New York Times, you could talk about this whole issue of audience engagement and how to use the tools that you have available to better engage with people. Now, in my case, again, I'm not monetizing this. This is not my job. It's a hobby. Some of it relates to my job for my video hosting. But what I like about it is an ability to have an audience where we can focus on audio issues or music issues or video issues or whatever. So for me, it's fun. But if a student wants to do this in the future for a job, to become a writer and to develop an audience, or to get in the film industry or do acting, this is a great opportunity to really use these tools of social media, in this case analytics, to get students to think more critically about what an audience is and how you engage an audience. So I think it's phenomenal. I mean, to have these tools available. Go ahead.
Do all of these social media events have what YouTube has? Because this is amazing with YouTube.
I'm trying to think. Let me think about, I'll just look here because I don't know. Let me type in Twitter analytics. Yep. I'll be curious to see because I never, oh, here we go. It looks like they do. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look as involved. And I don't look at Twitter as much because I'm not that active. I don't tweet that much. It tends to be political stuff. So it looks like it shows you tweet impressions, views, mentions, and followers. And it says I'm down by 1, so someone unfollowed me. But again, I don't do a lot. I've only done in my lifetime 122. And tweet impressions gets into how many times do your tweets appear in other places. That looks like a lot, but it's not really a lot for someone who is a top influencer or even a medium level influencer on Twitter. So it looks like it has it. It's maybe not as good. I don't know. I haven't really dived into it. It has the top follower, top media tweet, top mention. So kind of cool, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the YouTube analytics are brilliant.
Oh, they're just amazing. I mean, it's just, it's so cool that you can get that specific. And again, if I were using it if it were my job or something, I would really sit down and look at it and say, okay, what's really going on here? And you can often look at points on your timeline and see when there are spikes. And then maybe that relates to a particular type of video that you posted. Sometimes I'm always surprised, like why my video on the Monte Carlo, I don't know why, has so many viewers. And I want to say it has, what's the lifetime here? I have to click on the video and it'll show it. It has, 55,000 views. And I've often thought like, well, why is, and not a lot of, actually kind of 22 dislikes. So not a good percentage, almost 10% are dislikes. I don't really look at that, but I know again, for influencers, they're looking at mentions, they're looking at where their post gets profiled, where it gets shared. And that's kind of a good opportunity to look more critically at how your videos are making impressions. Why this one has more views than any other video, I don't know. Is it because it's about the Monte Carlo? I mean, the Monte Carlo, when I did this video, I was talking about how the casino was going away and it's now the Park MGM. Totally new theme, totally new design. They spent years taking out the old design, but maybe that itself was interesting enough that people clicked on Monte Carlo, Vegas, and then mine came up. Because one of the things that's also cool, I think, about using social media is meta tags. And what a tag is basically a keyword that allows, and you can see them down here, that allows a viewer to search either your description or tags fields or other even comment fields on your social media post. So when I create this, I think, okay, obviously it should say Monte Carlo. It should also say Park MGM, because that is the new casino that replaced the Monte Carlo. So using tags is another way of teaching skills. If you're teaching a student how to outline a paper in a class, in terms of key points, in terms of what topics you're going to use, maybe you're focusing on environmentalism, and one topic is consumerism and trying to get people to be better about not wasting as consumers. And then maybe an example is, and I'll use this because I saw it today in the news on social media, Burger King's reusable containers. In certain parts of the world, Burger King is introducing reusable containers. So if you get a hamburger, it'll be a deposit on that, not unlike a bottle deposit. When you return it, you get some money back, and then, these get reused over time. It's just the cost of washing and disinfecting them as opposed to new carbon materials to create them. So what I'm suggesting is, those are each like meta tags or keywords. Burger King is one, consumerism is another. So if you're teaching students a concept in an English class about how to outline a paper, and they've already experienced tags or meta tagging or keywords in social media, your battle might be half, or your work might be half done, or a quarter done, or an eighth done, because the students are already familiar with working with something like a key topic in a paper. The difference is they've been doing it in social media, and they didn't realize all along that the skill that they have actually is applicable beyond the world of social media. So that's what I love about this, is sometimes you could convince your students that they've been doing this for years. They just didn't realize it. To go back to our earlier points, there's some unlearning involved. If you're teaching an audio class or a video class and students have been using preset apps and filters on phones and devices, and they think their work is done, well, it's like, no, wait a second. You need to go back and really rethink what skills are needed to, as you said, break the rules. You first have to learn those rules, and I think that's really important. So this process isn't necessarily easy, but it's maybe a step up for your students to say, you've learned this in the world of social media. Let's take that and reapply it in a new way, or let's use it to write a better English paper, or to do a better job in a mix in an audio production class, or whatever. So I think it could be a cool opportunity to kind of use that as a tipping point to move in a new direction. Another example of this would be culinary arts, and how much social media has influenced how we think about culinary arts, or famous food shows. Andrew Zimmer, the late Tony Bourdain on TV. And so maybe someone who enters the world of culinary arts thinks that food should be a certain way, or a restaurant should be run a certain way, and they have an unrealistic view. But then you use that view that's been developed over social media to launch them into the field of culinary arts and to teach them how to do things, having been inspired by social media, but you require them to take some steps back and relearn what they thought they knew from the world of social media, and how maybe the culinary world gets portrayed on TV, in social media, on YouTube, or whatever. So it's kind of, I think, a cool opportunity. Fashion is another one. We don't teach fashion classes, but I watch a lot of those shows like Project Runway, and there are many others on all the streaming channels. And we haven't talked about streaming media, but that's another interesting connection to this. And they often have people as judges on those shows whose connection to the fashion industry is not having, gone through the ropes and, got their degree at Parsons, in New York, and learned fashion from one of the big, design schools. But they developed their own fashion show or fashion blog or YouTube channel that shows them trying on new styles, and then they engage a huge audience. And I know in the audio world, I watch a ton of YouTube, and there are specific people. I watch their YouTube shows when they're demoing a new audio synthesizer piece of gear. And some of these people have become so big that the companies pick them up. They hit a threshold of like 200,000 subscribers, and they're getting free gear, and they often are the first ones to demo that gear. There's a sort of chain of specific people, at least in the audio world. I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to be Myler Melodies, it's going to be Sonic State, it's going to be Loop Pop, and those people are always like 1, 2, and 3 in line, maybe in different orders. When there's a new piece of gear or a new Eurorack module, they're the ones that are demoing it, and immediately they get 50,000 impressions because they're so popular on social media. So that's another reminder of this, is that it could create like almost the haves and the have-nots, because some of the super big people in these worlds, if they're influencers in social media, are the equivalent, not as big, but they're somewhat like a Kardashian in that I think it's one of the Jenner kids, Kylie Jenner, if she does I think it's Instagram is her big one. If she does an Instagram post, whatever you call it, I'm not on Instagram, she immediately will get like 500,000 people or something looking at it, and that will go up over time. And if you followed the controversies related to the controversial Fyre Festival, there were 2 documentaries made about it on Hulu and also I think on HBO. This whole thing was a scam, basically a pyramid scheme. And one of the controversies from the Fyre Festival was that some of the influencers, including I think one of the Jenners and some other big models, was that they didn't get charged or prosecuted with the fraud charges that some of the creators of the Fire Festival did. And people were upset because they said, well, they were part of this scheme because they're so influential with their Instagram feeds and followers that they got a lot of people literally because of one post to spend $3,000 getting a deluxe package for a festival that literally was a complete scam and was actually even dangerous in terms of the conditions of the actual festival that happened in, I believe it was in the Bahamas. So, this world of social media, the good and the bad, some of the influencers out there, I have to say, are maybe up to no good if they're using social media to get people to buy into schemes. There's a lot of that goes on with even channels like Joe Rogan, where they will get people to buy vitamins or supplements because they have such an opportunity to reach millions of people through their influencer feeds that go on various channels. So it's a really weird world. I'm not going to say that it's totally positive. But yeah, using the analytics, using what we learn from our social media sites, for me, I think it's a great opportunity to teach our students a little bit about marketing yourself and developing an audience, whatever it is, the field or career path that you're going to follow. Now, as I mentioned earlier with blogs, I think the challenge with a blog is you have to think about just keeping up with it. I was terrible with my blog because I just wouldn't do the post. I just didn't spend the time, and then 2 weeks went by, and then a month, and then I never even did any posts. So I would say my advice for students and faculty is to fall into your social media platforms, if you're going to use these for classes, say, that are most fitting to your style and what you teach. So for me, I do a lot with music and audio and video. For me, YouTube is where I land. I've thought about Instagram, but I don't want to learn a new system, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to do YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and then add Instagram. So you have to think about the ones that will work for you. If you're using a blog, just be sure to continue to engage your audience with that blog if your audience is your students or some other group out there. What this is suggesting, you could use blogs actually as examples to teach in a class or as platforms of teaching. So you could ask students to create their own blog. Again, there are wiki pages that you could use built into Canvas that could be really interesting and cool. This example of developing models of good posts, I think is really cool, actually. One of the things I struggle with all the time in Canvas discussions, in the text-based discussions, not video Zooms, is that students don't know how to write their discussion posts. So what I could do is model some of this using social media and say, unlike a social media post on Facebook, you have to capitalize the first word in every sentence. You can't use a lowercase I when you're saying I. That has to be uppercase. You have to use good grammar. You have to write incomplete sentences. You can't, if you're doing inappropriate things on social media, and I'm thinking of some recent student examples, you cannot do that in my class, because my class is not a blog. My class is not a Facebook page or a YouTube page. You have to be professional. You have to treat students with respect. So depending on where your student's coming from, depending on what you're teaching, that moment of using a social media post as an example could either lead you in a direction of correcting behavior, saying, don't do this, because you're not allowed to yell at someone like you do maybe in your Facebook world. Or it could be a good thing, and it could say, hey, just like you are putting yourself out to the world and talking very confidently about your topic of environmentalism on Facebook or on Twitter, use that skill in my class, because I want you really to see that you have a voice, and it's important for you to include your voice in the class. So again, this takes you like in different directions. As Solange, as you said, every student is different. Some have the skills, some don't. Some have too much of the skills only related to cutting corners that happens with filters or ready-made templates in the social media worlds. And you have to kind of reorient those students to this world of, you got to do it from scratch. I want you to get your camera and do it the old-fashioned way. I'm not allowing you to use your iPhone and use a filter, because that is cutting too many corners. So it's kind of cool, because depending on the student, depending on the class, it can take you in so many different directions. So I don't know. I don't use blogs myself, but I thought this was a good argument of how you could use a real staple of social media, because blogs, I think they're maybe a little less popular than Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or even TikTok now, whatever is happening with TikTok with Trump's ban on the Chinese app. Blogs are maybe not as popular, but I think there's still an opportunity to think about presenting material to an audience, engaging with that audience, developing presence and community, as this particular article was talking about. So I don't know, any thoughts, Solange, on using blogs or using social media of this sort in class?
Well, what I've been doing is I've been using my discussions in Canvas.
Yeah.
And it's got a blog-like format.
It does. Mm-hmm.
And it inspires my students to respond to the blog-like format. They respond to what I have laid out for them, and then they respond to it in an essay format.
Yeah.
So even though it's not social media, it is the same thinking as a blog.
Yeah. Yeah, totally relevant. I'll pull this up. This one doesn't have students in it, so it's not going to be a FERPA issue. But yeah, what I like about it is when you click on a discussion, the format, you have choices at the top, and anytime you write something, you can, it's not showing in here. I may not have it set it up, but you can do liking on it. You can have threads like you would in social media. So it definitely is. I don't think we realize it. There's so many things in Canvas that are direct nods to social media. I mean, you see that in Canvas Studio. You see that in our discussions. And I think it's kind of a good thing. So it's potentially something to think about. And by the way, since we're talking about our Canvas sites, you can always go to your apps. And some of these apps actually might include social media sites. I'm trying to see here. There's so many. And some of these, by the way, if you want to set these up in your class, you might have to connect with Treva, just because in some cases it requires a administrator key to set up. I don't see these. YouTube is an example of one. I don't think there's a specific Facebook one on here, and I wouldn't be surprised in the future if some of the savvy social media sites, and I'm wondering if Facebook has done this. Has Facebook done anything like an educational app? Do you know, Solange?
I've never heard of that.
Okay, I don't know if they've done anything like that. I'm kind of curious now, like Facebook for education. Let's see if they've done that. Okay, it looks like they're doing something. I don't know what it is, but they're talking about educator hubs, exploring Facebook for communication. So they're on top of it. It's happening. There's even a group. It has only 4,500 members, but I think we're going to see more and more of this, kind of the creeping in of the corporate world in our classes, and it's going to probably require us to have some conversations as a college, as colleagues, because we're going to have to say, what do we think about that? Are we using this in a way that really benefits our students, or is allowing companies like Facebook to better market and manage their own marketing to our students? So I worry about that a little bit, but I guess we have to see what they're up to. I don't see, though, I guess they don't have a current app here, but you could explore these in your class. If any of these work for you, you could use them. I know the Foreign Languages Department uses a pretty cool app called Marco Polo, and Marco Polo actually is another form of social media. And specifically, it's an app that allows you to do video. It's asynchronous video. And so you download the app. It's free to use. They might have, some ads or something like that. But the idea is that you can do it on your own time. So I would record a little video message for a friend. And then when the friend logs on, that person could then, play the message, and then they could reply back. So it really is an asynchronous approach to video that I think is a little less common, because so much of the emphasis seems to be on live video, all the stuff going on with live streaming with OBS, open broadcasting software. The whole point is it happens live, albeit you could watch it after the fact, but the excitement of it is watching the thing live. And so, again, more apps and social media out there potentially that you could use in a class, and it's awesome because it allows you to do what it is that you're doing. So kind of cool, I think. I don't know. I don't know if any others jump out, but you know, again, if an app, if a form of social media works for your class, use it. Why be afraid to use it? Just because it's associated with Facebook doesn't mean that you can't apply it in some way that makes great sense for your class, you know. So I don't know.
I noticed that Vimeo is part of that
Yeah.
group of apps. Did you see that?
I didn't, but I know they're on there. Yeah.
Yeah, if you scroll down,
All the way at the bottom. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, there it is,
it's,
Vimeo. Yep. And it looks like, yeah, it's installed. Do you use Vimeo for your stuff? Or no?
I do not. I
You
use
don't?
YouTube.
Yeah, I use YouTube. I think Vimeo, it allows for higher res, but I think you have to pay. I think you have to pay after a certain point. Like in my case, I don't know how many videos I have, but I think it's unlimited. So it'd probably tell me on here. I don't know if it's going to show me how many total videos, but it's over 1,000 I have on here. So I don't want to have to pay. So that's, I think, the reason I decided not to use Vimeo in my own classes or in my own work. And um,
And
so
I don't think
yeah,
that if, unless you're very savvy with the visuals, I don't think high res makes that much of a difference.
yeah, totally true. I say this all the time to people teaching. Although you shouldn't have, you shouldn't have like, I don't know, 300 by whatever resolution. You should have at least what, 720, 1040 is nice. You don't have to have 4K. Or now they're talking about there's now 8K cameras that have been introduced. And some of our editing software maybe doesn't even allow us to use 8K yet. So you're totally right. You don't have to go crazy in terms of quality. But it should also be decent enough. We're always talking about microphones and trying to use good microphones. My pet peeve is always good audio, but whatever. If someone else uses a decent enough microphone from their laptop, go for it. It's perfectly fine. Your students are not going to hate you because your audio isn't pristine. So, right, yeah. And there are a lot of these you could take a look at. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, summarizing this, I feel like I'm pretty hopeful. I feel like, again, take the good and the bad of social media and use it in your class as is appropriate, whether you're actually showing real examples from social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, or you're just using the skill sets that are developed by student engagement and instructor engagement, our own engagements in social media. Cool opportunity, I think, to apply some of these to our classes. And I didn't actually do this, but in the future, maybe just to think about the pros and the cons. We talked about a lot of these, and then the classroom opportunities. I kind of just covered those as we move through the talk today. And if you're watching the video, you can get those. Cool, very cool. All right, well, thanks for attending, and I'll see you maybe next week.